Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a decidedly unexpected third part of a, I guess now, three-part series on a panel discussion from veterans of the intelligence community discussing the past, present, and future of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the intelligence community. Hope you're all doing well this morning. I'm going to try to keep the opening as brief as possible and not rehash too much from the previous two episodes because, well, that's what those are there for. Before I get into that, who's joining me this morning, this exciting morning of potential handover and power at Twitter? That's what everybody's talking about. Noah Asensio, Eric Peters, Matt Barnes, Jaeger Pony, Non-Vitae Rex. Who else? Keever Dam, Tall Person. Good morning. Wow. Okay. So StreamYard is telling me I'm having broadcasting issues. Am I roboting, guys? You guys tell me, because I can't tell. I'll wait a second for that, but I will continue otherwise. So this entire panel discussion is centered around a paper/study looking at the, as I said, past, present, and future of DEI in the CIA. Or they say the intelligence community, but everybody here is referencing the CIA. So the only thing I'll say about that is, in my opinion, their paper/review is entirely disingenuous. They are conflating the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the equal employment laws therein, Title VII and derivatives thereof, with the current fad of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if you know anything about the diversity, equity, and inclusion movement, it flies directly in the face of both the sentiment, intent, and black letter law of the Civil Rights Act and Title VII, which the surprise guest at this panel discussion pretty much just proved to all of us as the cliffhanger of the previous episode. So all of a sudden, a wild James Clapper appeared. James Clapper, for reference, is the former director of national intelligence, amongst several other positions over the course of his storied career in military intelligence and in central intelligence in general, or geospatial intelligence and so on. Anyway, so we had a surprise guest show up, turned into a cliffhanger. I'm going to start off from where he showed up and move forward. If you weren't here for part 2, you'll see why I'm doing a part 3 within the first 30 seconds of him talking. And what I'm most interested in is to see what else he has to say, and thereafter what everyone else on the panel has to say in response. So with that all as preamble, I'll start off with a few seconds for sound test. You guys tell me if you can hear it, and then we will proceed. I only plan on going about an hour, and so I'll try to keep my pause game as short as possible to get as much in as we can.
Director Clapper, it's good to see you, sir. I can hear you.
All right, you guys hear that all right? Let me know real quick. Let's see, any more hellos to say here? Shio Gorath, Decode, Ryan R., Jake Tungseth, Twisted Skipster, Mike Savage, and anybody else that I missed? I don't see anyone else. If I missed you, or if you're lurking, hello. Sounds good, says Keever Dam. All good, says Jaeger Pony. All right, let's go into James Clapper. Clap on.
Thanks. Can you see me, hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you.
I don't think I can do anything about that. That's okay. I'm ugly anyway. Hey, this has been a great discussion. One of the best I've ever listened to.
I like I said yesterday, James Clapper has obviously not listened to many discussions about DEI because I've heard better. I've heard a lot better, but okay.
I think that's a function of the quality of the panelists you have. I'd just like to say one comment about this. Having struggled with it, this challenge as an agency director twice for almost 9 years, and again as DNI for 6.5. And I became convinced, and this is not politically correct, but I'll say it to this group. I became convinced that the only way to really make progress in righting the wrongs with adequate representation of women minorities is to disproportionately recruit. You have to bring in a larger number of those cohorts, women and minorities at the entry level, in order to ensure that you can overcome the challenges posed by the attrition that occurs for reasons, sociological reasons, I believe, that are beyond the control of the intelligence community to fix all by itself.
Okay, so there's the windup and the pitch. Former director of national intelligence, James Clapper, is advocating for discriminatory recruiting practices in the intelligence community. And as I stated yesterday, in the long time that I've been looking at these things, I have every suspicion in the world that for the sake of solving DEI issues, that is probably the most effective way to solve that problem and avoid legal entanglements. Because if you, as I said yesterday, if you ensure that the only demographics of people that know that a job exists are the ones you're targeting to pad your numbers, it's difficult for somebody who wasn't aware that the job existed to then sue you or cite civil rights violations for being denied an employment opportunity because they never knew about it. And then your pool of candidates for whatever job, position, or otherwise you're looking for are inherently made up of the people within those demographics you're trying to fill, and then you're done. So the further away from a direct interview you can put the decision to start discriminating, the less likely you're going to have a problem legally going on down the line. That's my layman's analysis of things as I've listened both to, Director Clapper here and several other people in the past. So as a strategy, he's not wrong. Ethically, legally,
And a little vignette. Well, I think it was about 2003, and I was serving as the director of what was then called NEMA, later NGA.
Mm-hmm.
And every year, Husky used to have diversity hearings.
Yes.
And those were kind of a challenge because they were in public. So you could count on demonstrators being there to...
That tells about transparency. Yeah, okay. That was a problem. They were in public. Oh, okay. All right. Well, so I wonder if Director Clapper knows this is going out to the world.
Bad mouth the agency directors. I was on the receiving end of a lot of that.
Yeah.
Some of it was probably deserved.
Oh, okay.
So I stayed up the night before that hearing and rewrote my oral testimony to say just what I just said.
Oh.
But the only way to overcome this over time really is through disproportionate recruiting.
Okay, so you were advocating for this years ago, officially, in your capacity as a supervisor or management. What? Okay. Well, what was the reaction?
And at literally the 11th hour, I got a call from the Office of Management Budget, since you're supposed to submit testimonies to them.
And did they tell you, you can't say that?
Telling me I couldn't say that.
Oh, this is oh man, I was so close yesterday to just wrapping up and not looking at this any further. I am so happy I didn't. This is amazing. This is amazing. All right, so you had this in your mind when you were in a position to actually potentially make such things happen, and they told you, because it was obvious to anybody who has half a brain cell and even the most rudimentary understanding of civil rights law, that you couldn't say that and get away with it and still keep your job. Okay, so what happened then, Clapper?
Because that smacked of quotas.
That smacked of quotas? Oh, like it indicated it? No, that's not a smack. That is right there. That is a quota. That is a quota. That is by definition a quota. Smacks of quota, like it's just an implication. No, that is a quota, Director.
So I decided, okay, I'll do it unofficially.
Oh, what? What? So, former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper is confessing to having, under the radar, instituted racially and sexually discriminatory recruiting practices. I don't know what to say, except does he know he's on the air?
And I tried to do that at NGA to bring in more women and more minorities by concentrating, for example, on historically Black colleges and universities for recruiting efforts. And
one of the previous speakers said you can't do that, or that's not good enough. But okay.
I could do that. I could send my recruiters from NGA or NEMA where I wanted to.
Okay, yeah. So again, if you build your talent pool specifically from those demographics you're trying to fill the quota for, okay. Here's the problem, though. It all kind of falls apart when you confess that that's what you were doing. Okay? If you keep it under the radar, if you keep it off the books, it's pretty hard to follow up on that. But if you tell people that that was your plan from the beginning, oh boy.
So we will make, the history has been, as you all know better than I, we've made very small incremental improvements each year over time.
Yeah.
But I'm convinced that the only way we're ever going to really overcome this is through disproportionate recruiting.
So even now, even after having been told not to advocate for that idea, you did it anyway, which is, again, I am not a civil rights lawyer. I am not an expert in civil rights law, but a federal agency specifically discriminating in its recruiting practices on the basis of race and or gender for something other than, say, a field agent or some kind of operative measure where those kind of things are necessary for cover or insertion, something like that. But you did it anyway. And you still advocate for it. I cannot wait to hear what the other people on the panel have to say about this.
I'm very proud of the fact that I had a lot to do with the installation of the first woman as a major agency director, Tish Long as director of NGA.
Yeah.
And then Betty Sapp as director of the NRO, the first there as well.
Yeah. Were those selections filtered first by their genitals then? Because now I have to assume that that is so.
Well, both of whom were superb and had a lot to do with the installation of Vince Stewart as the first African-American director of one of the major intelligence agencies.
This, honestly, I'm not trying to, conjure any false drama here or anything, but this is honestly the most, the highest level, most candid admission of instituting these kind of practices that I have ever come across in the history of this channel. I often suspect what the only solution is for the problem cited, as I've said several times in the past, and it's not often that anybody ever actually offers up what has to be the only pathway to solving for that problem. But here we have a former super high-level government official telling us that this is what he did and this is how he practiced his recruiting and appointment decisions. This is something else.
Well, all of which, by the way, long overdue. I thought those were important symbols.
Symbols. That was your concern, that they were symbols. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, when it comes to putting people into positions of authority in government specifically, I think you should stick to symbols on a drum set, because you just reduced all of those people you just listed down to tokens. I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
But actually, institutionally, they really don't solve the problem.
Oh, they didn't solve the problem? Why not? I mean, you were practicing this. This was your solution. So if they didn't solve the problem, what is the solution?
And I say this out of conviction that people mean well. Every director, issues statements, does commission studies and all that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't change things very much. And if the community is going to, and had it been easy to solve, we'd have done it a long time ago.
But while you were in charge, you did institute these practices. I just want to make sure we're all clear on that. You're not talking after the fact, on reflection, as a retired individual. No, you did these things while you were in charge. Okay.
So anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to vent and offer my 2 cents.
Oh yeah.
And it's been a great discussion. I really benefited from it.
Okay. All right. There was the aperitif. Now onto the main course, which I'm more interested in, to hear what the people who have been dancing around this issue up to this point on the panel have to say in response. Will they address this directly or not?
So thanks.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's great to hear you and really appreciate your insight and your long tenured service in U.S. government and the lessons we all continue to learn from you here at the Belfer Center. So thank you.
Okay. You might have missed a spot with your tongue there, but okay.
Jeff, over to you.
Yeah, Jeff. What do you have to say, Jeff?
Lori. Yeah.
Yeah, is Jeff, I think Jeff is the one who was complaining that recruiting from historically black colleges wasn't enough.
So I would just say first, I love Lori's point, and this is something that I communicate to every student, every person I speak to who may have aspirations for joining is...
Wait, you got nothing to say about what Clapper just said? Really? Okay.
What the world, and particularly America, has told you makes you deficient is your superpower.
What?
Right? If you wear a hijab, if you speak with an accent, if you have a physical disability, how you navigate the world, that's your superpower. So lean into that. And I know for me personally on my team, that's something that I want to make sure that every single person knows is that, like, I want to create space where you can feel free to be your full self.
Bring your whole self to work. American society tells you have a deficiency. That's your superpower. Oh, American society, is that what? Okay, you have nothing to say. I mean, you were very passionate in part 1, I believe, of this series about how recruiting from historically black colleges isn't enough. And now Director Clapper just said that that's explicitly what he did to try to balance out the numbers. And you've got nothing to say on that? Or are you just starstruck by Clapper?
Because I need you to bring your full self to the table when we talk about strategy, when we talk about, executing operations. I just wanted to...
Okay, what does someone's disability have to do with executing operations? What does that mean? Can you give me an example? Right? Can you give me an example of somebody who came to the table who possessed a disability of some kind or another, and that disability or living with that disability provided you specifically valuable insight into strategy because of that disability, not because that they knew something, right? You talked about linguistics or accents. Well, that's different. I want to know what the disability part has to do with anything. But I'm sure we won't get an example. Thank you, Matt Barnes. I, for one, can't wait to welcome my Sino overlords. Sino? Okay. Maybe it's me being a boomer. I don't know what that means. So if you just tricked me into saying something really funny, I didn't get the joke. Sorry.
Anyone in the audience here, I just wanted to second what Lori's point about what society, what the cover of news of magazines, what Hollywood, what they tell you about your body type or whatever it is that you've been tried to, been brainwashed to believe makes you deficient. That's your superpower.
Brainwashed to believe you're deficient. So if I'm morbidly obese, that's a superpower. Can't wait to hear that one.
No more for the women and the people of color. No code switching. No more code switching.
What?
No more hiding your accent. No more be your true self, because we need you to be your true self. That is your superpower. So
you want You want people to be their true selves in the intelligence community. I guess it depends on the circumstances. I don't think that always works. But again, in the absence of providing me a direct or at least a working hypothetical example of what you're talking about, I don't know what you're talking about.
I just wanted to, second what Lori said.
Okay.
Because I truly believe that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I believe that you believe.
I will say that, my experience, again, early on, like many of us are idealists, and we believe that we can change the world, right?
Yeah. No, I'm getting that, and it's also kind of disturbing in some places. But okay, yeah.
And for me, it took a little bit longer for reality to sink in, because when you're doing operations, again, for me, I almost always had an integrated team. What? Because I was operating in Africa, I was operating in the Middle East, I was operating in Eastern Europe.
So you mean you had people on your team who were from all over the place with different knowledge, linguistics, experience that lent themselves productively to whatever you were working on? Yeah, I can believe it, and I would hope that that's what you're doing. What does someone's weight have to do with that? What is someone's... disability could mean a zillion different things. What does that have to do with anything?
Almost always had an integrated team.
Uh-huh.
And
well, I wish you'd define integrated, but okay.
It wasn't until I got into management and came back to DC where I was like, wow, there was really nobody who looks like me.
Yeah, you go from the implication of merit back to aesthetics. It's this is quite incredible. It really is, to see this amount of virtue signaling mental gymnastics back and forth between things that are rationally correct to bring up when you're talking about intelligence matters around the world, different parts of the world. And then we go straight back to, I didn't see people that looked like me. All right, well, then what did you do? When you don't see enough people around you that look like you, what does that do for you or do to you?
I'm like, okay. And, and this is kind of what prompted my foray into academia, to really understand how to change, how can you change bureaucracy? How can you institute culture change? And it's...
Well, Director Clapper just told you. I mean, if your main concern is the aesthetics of the people around you, Director Clapper already attempted to do that in his time in charge of things. So what answer did you come up to the contrary or elsewise, right, in all your study in academia? Thank you, Matt Barnes. I'm older than you, Scribe. Sino is a geographical description of China, like Oriental/Occidental for East/West. Oh, well, I'd never heard that before, so I learned something new. And now I know. And knowing is a constantly depressing situation. Anyway.
It's almost impossible to reach a critical mass of enough good folks to overcome institutionalized, right?
Who are the good folks?
Thinking and systems. And we are trying to overcome decades long, maybe even hundreds of years long, of institutionalized thinking about who should be able to serve their country in this capacity, right?
Uh-huh. And so outside of Director Clapper's philosophy, what conclusions have you come to in trying to address this problem?
So you have to change. You need good people as well. You're always going to need good people, but you need...
Okay. What qualifies someone as a quote-unquote good person? What does that mean? I know I'm asking rhetorically. This is just how my mind works. When people say things, but they don't explain, question marks abound.
We need to change the system. We need to change the culture.
How?
And so I think
how
it took me coming to DC to see that there was zero or very, very few people who look like me, or like the people who I grew up with, in leadership positions, for me to appreciate that, wow, it doesn't matter how many good people doing the right thing every day, until we change the system, until we change the culture, are we going to really see the kind of change that we want? And
okay, well, what do you have to say about Director Clapper? He apparently just by whim decided to change the system, change the culture, even though it flew in the face of federal law. And he says that nothing really changed. So if you're not suggesting to do what Director Clapper did, what does your experience tell you is the solution?
And I think, again, to second Director Clapper's point, and I think, which is kind of what the paper highlights as well, is that good intentions aren't enough. If you think about the Civil Rights Act and Title IX, right?
You want to talk about Title VII, not Title IX. Title IX's different.
There was a study done a few years ago that said the three biggest, the Civil Rights Act was designed, and a lot of the things that came out of like affirmative action, some other things, whether you agree with it or not, were specifically designed to impact the descendants of slaves in America, right? The biggest benefactor from the Civil Rights Act is in America, white women. Second to that are immigrants, and third to that are African immigrants.
Oh, there's a difference between immigrants and African immigrants? Okay. Are you from Africa?
Right. Great. Fantastic.
But
right. But for those of us in this profession, we know the danger of mission creep, right?
What?
And while there were really great intentions behind what was going into the Civil Rights Act and a lot of the other things like Title IX that came out of that.
Title VII. Unless you're talking about something completely different. I mean, maybe I'm stepping on toes here, but if we're talking about employment opportunities in federal institutions or those accepting federal funds, Title VII, not Title IX. And if I'm speaking out of turn, because God knows I'm not a constitutional scholar, then by all means, rip me a new one in the comments or in the chat. But as far as I understand it, when it comes to specifically discrimination in employment opportunities, it's Title VII.
No one really took time to assess, and I think the paper highlights that there was really no system for evaluating, hey, are we having the impact that we thought we were going to have? Because if you're saying that a lot of these things were supposed to impact the descendants of slaves, and the top three groups who are benefiting from this act are not the descendants of slaves, but then and it's very virtuous, very like things that we absolutely need, but that's not what it was originally designed to do.
I have no idea what he's talking about right now. Look at the words of the law. It doesn't say descendants of slaves. It says you are not allowed to discriminate employment opportunities on the basis of race, sex, ethnicity, religion. There's a couple other in there that I'm forgetting at the moment, but either way, that's what it is there to do. It doesn't say this is here to benefit this demographic. It is to say the considerations of demographics are not allowed to be considered. That's what it does. Now, if you want to talk about the statistical results of that or something, okay, well, all right, I come right back to the start again. What do you suggest be done in the alternative to solve for the problem that you are citing?
And so how do we ensure that we align those good intentions with a system of accountability and transparency?
Okay.
That ensures that we have an iterative process.
Yeah.
That is honest and is inclusive.
Yeah.
So that we can address the issue in a way that has long-standing impact. And
okay. Well, then what do you think? What is your idea? Even if it's not completely forged into a keen point yet, what do you suggest be done? If not what Director Clapper did, then what do you suggest be done to solve for this problem?
So, and one other thing I wanted to say also as well is the transparency piece.
Yeah.
I think this is also highlighted in the paper.
Okay.
For those of you who've been watching, the horrible developments with Ukraine and Russia, one of the silver linings, not to at all in any way, shape, form, or fashion minimize the level of suffering that's happening in Ukraine.
Okay, I'm sorry. If you start off by saying, look at the silver lining in reference to what's going on in Ukraine, and then say, not to diminish anything, you're about to diminish things.
And within that diaspora, in Russia, Russian diaspora as well.
Uh-huh.
But silver lining with regard to the intelligence profession is the incredible degree to which the administration has declassed and disseminated information to inform the public, to inform public policymakers, but also to actually have battlefield impact, to remove options for Putin as they're navigating the battlefield in Ukraine.
Okay, so basically you approve of the public disclosures of what might otherwise be classified information or non-public information by the Biden administration. You've been cool with that, because there's been a couple of examples in the last month or two that seemed completely out of character for what you would consider to be wise information that'd be wise to disclose to the public. But okay, so you're cool with their performance so far. All right.
And I think,
And what does this have to do with DEI again?
I think, at least from the Intel project, I think there's a consensus around the community defaults to classification way too much. And I feel like, how do we address the diversity deficiency without being transparent?
Well, apparently, according to Director Clapper, when you're told you can't do a thing, do it unofficially and not tell anybody until some random Zoom call years after the fact. I mean, when Director Clapper was going to be transparent about it, he was told, rightfully so, yeah, you can't say that because that deals with quotas, and we're a federal agency and we operate under the Constitution. Are you sure you want transparency? Because otherwise, Director Clapper never would have been able to make a move. Of course, I haven't heard yet whether or not you agree with Director Clapper's policies at all. So
it's just like, it can't work, right?
Right.
The contractor vignette that you all discussed is a case and example about that, right?
About what?
I to that, just one anecdote for myself.
Okay.
And then I'll shut up.
Yeah.
Also in the paper, and I think Kristen touched on it as well, is that the last 20 years, right, the IC was very, very paramilitary focused, right?
Okay.
And that has obvious limitations and barriers to entry for leadership for women, particularly in the military before combat roles were opened up to them, right? Because for you to get a star, become a 4-star, if you had to have combat command and you can't, as a woman, enter a combat role, well, then how are you ever going to become a general, a 4-star general, right? But also, too, it limited, just based on a lot of the cultural realities on the ground. So, for instance, how is there
a female director then? I mean, now off the top of my head, I don't know that lady's history. Maybe she has a military history. Was she a general? I don't know.
A time when I was in Afghanistan and I was with a team in ODA with one of the special forces groups. And for those of you who aren't aware, that's usually a team of 12 to 15 guys who are outside, who are in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. And in this particular case, we were attached, the 5 we were on, we were attached to a larger conventional base.
Okay.
We had one woman as a targeter who was a contractor who was attached to us.
Okay.
She was fantastic, phenomenal. Yeah. For those of you who don't understand the value of intelligence, of intelligence-informed operations, if you don't get intel, if you ain't got a good analyst or a good targeter, you ain't going to get targets, right?
So you're talking about skill. You're talking about abilities, talents, and experience.
You can't have fun. And she was integral to the success that we were having in that particular province in Afghanistan.
Based on her experience and skills, right?
The rate of sexual assault on that conventional base was so high that we had to set up a system where in the middle of the night, if she had to go to the bathroom, 2 guys had to accompany her to the bathroom.
Okay, well, now that's just terrifying. Why was the rate of sexual assault on that base so high? Who was failing in their jobs there? Okay, now I'm more curious about, like, what was being allowed to happen at that place, that it was so high that every female needed 2 guys to guard her to go to the bathroom. That's a story and a half right there. I hope some newspaper or journalist out there somewhere has been looking into that.
Now think about when you talk about pressures.
Now, hold on. What does that have to do with hiring and recruitment practices in the intelligence community? What?
And stressors and things that have nothing to do with the mission.
Yeah, you're right. Nothing to do with the mission, like someone's gender. But yeah, okay. It sounds like the place you were at was an absolute hellhole. Where are you going with this?
Right. And now you think about the women because, right, people want to go where the action is. A lot of times promotion is based on your experience and your ability to perform and thrive in that environment.
Yeah.
So if you're a woman back in DC or back in the United States and you're hearing that, wait, you have to do what? How many women do you think are going to be lining up to take that assignment?
So they have a choice? Are you saying that there are places in the world that are very dangerous, and given the option to or not to go to those places, someone could choose not to? Well, okay, so what would you do, or what's going on to solve for that? Why? I got way more questions now. I want to find out about this base he was at, this base that was just rampant with sexual assault to the point where apparently nobody could do anything about it, and every woman had to be guarded. What does that have to do with employment practices again? Recruitment, promotion?
Right. So it's the things that we don't even think about or don't even consider if we're not in that, if we don't have that perspective to say, wow, we just probably told, 20,000 women that there's no place for them because in order to be combat effective, this team has to sign 2 men to escort this woman to the bathroom in the middle of the night because the rate of sexual assault on the conventional base is so high.
Who was committing the sexual assault? Why weren't they being prosecuted and removed? What? All right, this is a whole extra story and a half now.
Thank you very much, Jeff. What a powerful, illustrative example.
A really powerful illustrative example
of the challenges that we tried to understand in our report about how there are so many.
Wait a second. A bunch of crimes taking place on a military base says what about the hiring, promotion policies of the intelligence community? What? I am really confused right now.
Challenges in deployment and overseas that one doesn't always think about, but nevertheless shapes the reality.
Yeah, I guess it is a reality. What does that have to do with the history of DEI in the CIA? Okay.
And is very much part of the lived experience that is insufficient and inadequate for an intelligence community in the 21st century, really any century, quite frankly. But
that sounds like more of a military discipline thing going on. Okay, maybe I'm just overwhelmed. I think I've been thrown off the track here a little bit.
I now want to turn to Lori, who has been teed up by Kristen, because she is, without a doubt in my mind, our MVP on this panel and has some really
Oh, is this the lady with the really loud microphone? Oh, God, I'm going to have to turn down the volume again, aren't I?
Interesting background about working with the very late but most excellent Madeleine Albright.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay, I'm turning. Her microphone is just stabbing into my eardrums.
Very much. I mean, I had to take some notes here because there are so many themes and words that people popped out there that I just want to make some very brief comments on, and then I will talk about the Women in Leadership report, because personally that was a defining moment in my own career, and I'll share a little bit of that. But let me just say a few things. One, I just wanted to mention in terms of transparency, and this is about both the Women in Leadership report that CI did in 2013, that's when the report was released, and the Diversity in Leadership study that was released in 2015. Those reports are out there in the public sphere, as are each year of implementation, what was done. So
was Director Clapper's unofficial effort to recruit on the basis of discriminatory practices out there? Was that a known quantity prior to this Zoom call? I'd be curious about that.
For anyone who's interested, just Google DAG, Women in Leadership, and CIA DLS study, and you can read all about them, which I think was an excellent move on the part of Director Brennan.
Well, here's a question. Given the fact that Director Clapper just confessed to the fact that he was instituting practices unofficially, without documentation or oversight, seemingly, or he was going against the advice of the oversight that he had at the time, why should I believe anything in those reports? Why should I believe that anything in those reports is either accurate, or that anything done or said in them was ever done or said?
To make those publicly available, and that speaks to the point of transparency.
Yeah, it speaks to the point of transparency, except it's been completely blown away by Director Clapper.
On visibility, I just wanted to say this was an aha moment for me when I was working on the Women in Leadership report, because one of the things that I heard loud and clear, and particularly from minority officers, honestly, was I need to be able to kind of see myself.
Get a mirror.
And, you know, Natalie, your point is a good one. This isn't just seeing yourself, but somebody who doesn't have the skill set to do the job as well, certainly. So one of the things I like to do in my spare time, I don't know, I love to look at popular movies and kind of pull out the leadership theme.
Oh, okay. What has been your most informative popular movie thus far?
So I don't know how many of you have seen My Cousin Vinny.
Okay, what can My Cousin Vinny teach us about leadership in the intelligence community? Go.
It's out there. It was, I don't know, in the 90s or whatever, Joe Pesci. But there's a scene when he says, I went into law because my mentor, the judge, who comes from whatever it was, whatever area of the country, which was, you know, somewhat backwater, or people didn't always have a lot of education, because he became a judge. And I thought to myself, if he can do it, I can too.
Was that example from Joe Pesci's character based on the race of the individual? Or was it based on the socioeconomic circumstances the person found themselves in? Was he inspired by their race and genitals, or was he inspired by a common personal experience? Now, take that, contrast it with what's been said so far, and what you are yourself now saying.
And that's just kind of a fun example of how that visibility comes into play.
That had nothing to do with the aesthetics of the individual. It had everything to do with a common shared origin story, a socioeconomic, cultural. Are you kidding me right now? That has nothing to do with what has been said. Nothing.
I would say. I also wanted to just briefly address what Director Clapper said, not so much on the recruitment side.
No. All he was talking about was recruitment. But okay, what do you have to say about what Clapper said?
Because I agree that that is a huge problem. I mean, we have to bring the numbers in order to optimize talent within the organization. But
so you have to fulfill the quota based on ethnicity, race, gender, orientation, then we'll think about the actual skill set, possessed abilities, and so on. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm glad you're on board with Clapper on that one.
But I will say, in terms of CIA, some of the things that were done was when we were selecting for assignments, so people are already in the building, so this isn't about recruitment necessarily, but on assignment selection, it really was trying to widen the pool as much as possible. So you really want to be broad about...
No. It was nothing about widening the pool. It was about being very, very particular about where you were drawing the talent pool from. That was not wide. That was not a wide net cast. Okay, that was a butterfly net. Could you be more contradictory, example after example, than you've already been? Between My Cousin Vinny and now saying wide net after listening to what Clapper said? Are you kidding me right now?
Here's an assignment, who should apply? And that gets to good managers encouraging people who otherwise might be reluctant to apply.
Who should apply? The people with the skill set necessary to do so, I guess. But you're not talking about that, are you?
To apply to that so that you have a good pool of people to choose the talent from, and then think about that as a team dynamic. Who brings what to the table that's going to complement the chief role and the deputy role, for example?
I don't know, but at what point do you consider race and or gender and or whatever other element of a person's makeup that says nothing about their abilities? Because wherever you put that into the process of deciding who gets to go where or how, I'll tell you where you start discriminating against people illegally in a federal institution. Okay?
So I just wanted to make those brief comments.
Yeah, well, I'm impressed as all heck between My Cousin Vinny and casting a wide net by going specifically to historically black colleges and wherever Clapper said he went to find women.
And then I did want to say from a personal standpoint, so like Kristen 30 some years ago, I often was the only woman in the room. I grew up in the Directorate of Operations, so, you know, heavy on male case officers at the time, definitely.
And that was a problem for you?
I was not a case officer. I was something known as a collection management officer. And honestly, we tended to be female. So there was a little bit of your gender was kind of defined by the role that you had. But that
your gender was defined by the role that you had. So wait, if you'd been a case officer, you would have been male? What did you? I don't know. Did you at any point attempt to become a case officer or to ascend beyond that department? What are you talking about?
That definitely changed over time.
Yeah.
But I think I was somewhat ignorant, frankly, of gender challenges.
Or maybe there weren't as many as you're reflexively putting back, projecting into the past or something. If you never ran into them, you were just ignorant of them. It's not that they weren't there in your case. You just didn't know they were there. Oh, okay.
Challenges that maybe minorities felt, you know, it really didn't come to clear for me, honestly. I mean, I might have experienced some of these things. Like I do recall a boss telling me, "Great job, good girl," or
"Oh yeah, boy, now take that guy to The Hague," right there.
You know, having written in a performance evaluation once that, you know, I'm as good an officer as I am a new mother. Why does that relate? I don't know. But
I don't know. You're right. It doesn't relate. It makes about as much sense as saying that the example from My Cousin Vinny has anything to do with what's been talked about so far. You're right. You're absolutely right.
But but I kind of took these things in stride and didn't really think about it. But it was when I was tapped on the shoulder and asked, we did this report on women in leadership. We want somebody to implement the recommendations. Would you do it? And I said, could I read the report first? And when I read the report and looked at the recommendations and looked at what the findings were, I saw myself in this.
Because you're a woman?
Oh my gosh. I struggled when I was part-time.
Because you're a woman?
I was part of a tandem couple.
Because you're a woman?
My husband had worked at the organization too, so we had to kind of, balance out what that looks like. And
so your husband also worked at the organization in tandem. Is your husband a woman?
Frankly, my career, got sidetracked. And
by what? By becoming a mother, by raising your children and deciding to build a family? Was it sidetracked of your own volition by any chance?
So there were elements of that. Workplace flexibility was a big deal. And I looked at that report and I thought, wow, this really resonates with me. So I was pleased and happy to move forward in implementing recommendations around that report because I personally could relate to so much of it. And one of the things, and this was Madeline Albright's guidance to the panel. Natalie, I don't know if this came about in any of your focus groups, but she really wanted to structure the report in a way that said there are systemic barriers. And in the case of the Women in Leadership report, of course, the focus was on women assuming greater instances of promotion as well as positions of greater authority commensurate with how they're represented in the workforce.
Okay, what does that mean?
This isn't to give women more jobs or...
Are you kidding me right now? Are you kidding me right? Okay, well then what do you suggest have happen? Huh? I mean, if the problem is you cannot see yourself in leadership positions, and by see yourself, you're talking about women in your case, then what otherwise could it mean but to put people into positions of leadership because they are women? Good gravy. Will you listen to yourselves?
Or to give women, promote women for the sake of promoting women.
Are you sure about that?
But if women are represented about half of our workforce, why are they, I think that statistic is out there in the report, like 30% at the highest levels. Like what gives? What's happening here?
Oh, I don't know. Gosh, what could be driving a difference in career path between men and women? Tell me, oh, tell me true. Lady who decided to have children. Lady who decided to set her career aside to raise her children. Which there is nothing wrong with, but that is a choice that you made. And so if you decide to do something different than your male counterparts in your career path, what do you know? The proportions of men to women in leadership roles for experience and dedication to the job versus raising a family are going to be different. What could possibly be the factors? You saw yourself in the report, but you are seemingly incapable of the self-awareness necessary to see yourself as an example of the answer to your own question. Good gravy.
So the report did focus on systemic barriers, but there was also a self aspect to it. And I think it's important to recognize that we're all different people. We make personal choices, and that's okay. We just want people to be able to make informed personal choices, and we want managers to understand where people are in their lives and not necessarily be accepting of situations where women in particular tend to off-ramp when they are at a certain point in their career because of childcare responsibilities or what have you.
Responsibilities that are chosen. You choose to do that. So, okay, so you acknowledge that. Then what exactly are you asking? Why is this a mystery to you?
And just accept that, but to let people know these are the consequences, and then
okay. So your advice is for managers in the intelligence community to take, let's just say, all of the agents. We'll set aside the whole gender distinguished thing, and we'll just say all these. We'll say, hey guys, just so you know, if you decide to have children, and you decide to stay home and raise your children, it might interfere with your career path. That's what you want to have happen. You want some informed decisions. Okay, so you want to take grown adults and let them know that if they decide to stay home and raise their kids, it might affect their advancement throughout the agency and their career paths. Okay. All right. Well, hey, you know what? I'll go along with that. You know, I'll go along, and everybody gets to have a well, duh, advisory moment with their manager as soon as they walk into the door, the day that they are hired. Right? Somewhere in there that says, your decision to leave work to raise children may affect your career path. Because a grown adult, a thinking adult in the intelligence community obviously needs to be told this. Okay, well, I mean, you've been there, you know. I mean, if someone had told you that, you know, obviously esoteric piece of information, would you not have had your kids? Would you have decided not to become a mother? Are you upset about the fact that your decision to drop out of the workforce to raise your kids had a negative effect on your career path? What exactly are you asking for? An informed decision? Okay. It's very simple. It's almost like you shouldn't have to be told such a thing.
Fine. You know, you make kind of your choices as you want. And maybe it's the male partner in this maybe mother-father relationship who wants to off-ramp at this time, and that's okay too.
Is it though? Because it sounds... Sorry, that was me taking my glasses off, putting them on the keyboard for a second and rubbing my eyes because I'm just... I don't know.
I actually remember a situation where I had a male employee who came to me and said, you know, my wife's going to have a baby. I'd like to take 4 months off. And honestly, my reaction was, what?
Yeah. Okay. How much time did you take off to raise your kids?
You're going to take 4 months off to take care of the baby?
How much time did you take off?
Inside my head, I don't think I vocalized that. And then I thought to myself, wait a minute, this is a talented guy. He's worth keeping, and yes, of course, why not? You should be able to go on leave without pay for 4 months.
Go on leave without pay for 4 months? Okay. So was this before admittedly, I am not an expert in parental leave laws and things like that, and family support laws and things like that. So I don't know. Okay, so you decided not to fire him because he decided to go off and raise his kid. Well, that's very kind of you, given the fact that I assume at this point you'd already been a parent in the same situation.
But, you know, kind of struck me the wrong way, and I must say I had to kind of think about that, if you will.
You had to think about someone asking for time off to raise their child because they were a man. Okay. Well, I think we found the problem.
So I guess my conclusion on all of this is I really respect the fact that Director Brennan in particular, and it was his decision, made these reports public. I think that there has been an evolution for the good in terms of some of the things that were put in place as a result of these two reports and others. But I do think, and I know you're going to get to recommendations here, Michael, probably shortly, that came from your report. It's not a one and done, right? We can't just say, we've solved the issue, we're good. And there have been fits and starts. And I appreciate Natalie raising the, you know, George Floyd and what's been happening in society, because I think that had a polarizing effect. And I think there is an element within the IC that says, I've had enough. I've had enough about this talk around diversity and inclusion. When are we going to end this? Well, we're going to end it the day that we don't need to really talk about it, frankly, when it becomes intertwined within the fabric of who we are and it's second nature to do the things that we try to do. And
listen to that zealotry right there. Listen to that. It's never going to end. It's never going to end.
I'll stop there.
You might stop talking. I have a feeling you're not going to stop.
Oh, thank you very much, Lori.
Okay, we're at the hour mark. I really don't want to do a part 4. I'm going to go for a half hour more just to make sure I don't cover all the bases. If anybody here was planning on being done in an hour, well, you can pause and come back later. I do not want to do a part 4 on this.
Couldn't agree more that this is not a one and done. You write the report, therefore everything is great. No, absolutely not. One of the major trend lines from our findings is that this is a perpetual challenge. It's a consistent one, and I think the challenge for us
the war is never over.
Indeed, remain consistent, keep our eye on the ball from generation to generation. And I'd like to just talk for a few minutes about our recommendations on what might that be. What are some ideas for today and tomorrow?
Okay.
For trying to build a better intelligence community for.
Yeah, make intelligence great again. All right. Well, okay. I guess this is technically what I've been waiting for, right? This is what I've been asking for this entire time. Is exactly what would you suggest be done? If not what Clapper said, then what and otherwise. Thank you again, Matt Barnes. Scribe, my father-in-law was naval intelligence. If he wasn't passed on, this would have put him there. Bonkers. This is, and again, I only have to go off of what these individual people are saying. I have no idea what goes on in the larger scope of it, except for what Director Clapper said he did and he implemented under the radar, unofficially, which says a lot, and it's quite remarkable, as they say, that no one else has really dwelled on the fact that he wasn't just talking off into the ether. This is something he implemented. I'm not going to comment on the fact that it is about quotas, it was about tokenism, symbols, and so on. But okay. All right. Here are your recommendations for today and tomorrow.
For the United States, but also for the workforce.
Okay. Ready to go.
So we think the first step, and we talked about this a little bit regarding including contractors and metrics, and how do you really get an actual number that reflects who you are? Because if you don't know who you are, how can you possibly understand how to move forward?
You don't care about the who. Apologies to Jimmy Page. You don't care about the who in this situation. You only care about the what. You care about the aesthetic, not the person. You care about the demographic, not the individual.
So that's sort of one of the big points we wanted to make. And if DEI is a mission imperative, we have to reflect diversity in the broadest context. So it might be worth thinking about setting goals and objectives that...
Quotas, you mean?
...are perhaps beyond congressionally mandated targets. So
okay.
Not trying to simply hit what the law says, but go above and beyond if you can. I say that sitting in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I understand in implementation that can be hard, but nevertheless, if you set your goals high, which we should for the American intelligence community, then...
Your goals being quotas? You guys keep talking about transparency, yet you keep talking in riddles.
Perhaps we will get to where we have to be.
Have to? Okay, what is have to be? What is the goal? What is your recommended goal? Why aren't you telling us what the goal should be? It should be a very clear-cut kind of thing, right? Even if you don't know, let's say you don't know the current makeup, all right? In a perfect world, it would be what? And then work backwards from that. How do you achieve that goal?
Transforming culture remains one of the hardest organizational elements to change. And we've heard some themes about that today with our panel. And indeed, we were reminded of that last week with someone visiting our team here at the Belfer Center. As we've seen in past cases of intelligence community reform, so thinking about 2005 or even going back to studies and reports on intelligence community reform in the 70s and the 50s, it requires often a generation of turnover. And that's disheartening on some level, but nevertheless, it means that you have to remain increasingly agile.
So what, do a regular culling of the workforce? What are you recommending be done? Is this just the lead up? Are you going to get to like point by point, this is what should be implemented? Because I'm dying to know.
And push ahead. The positive note here, I think, and we've heard this today, we've seen this in our discussions, is that this is indeed a different era in 2022. We're not facing
It's the current year, everybody.
Of the same stigmas and challenges that we faced in the 1950s.
You know what? Given what's been said so far in this presentation, you could have fooled me. Because a lot of things you guys are talking about or musing on sure sound like times haven't changed at all since the 1950s.
But nevertheless, there are still many we have to overcome. So the next generation is indeed on the ascent, and I think they are very committed to diversity and inclusion on the whole.
Oh, and thank goodness. Oh, good.
But now, how do we build on that?
Yeah.
How do we build on generational dynamics by strengthening and amplifying positive trends that are underway within recruitment, mentorship, leadership across the community at every stage?
Well, you tell me. You're the expert. You did the report.
Yes, absolutely, the senior level, but also mid-level buy-in from department managers or leaders.
Okay.
And also at the lower levels as well.
So all levels. You could just say all levels and save us a whole bunch of verbal diarrhea.
I won't dive too deep into this.
Yeah, why bother? You only did a report, a study. We're only here to listen to your recommendations. Why dive any deeper? Transparency. Just the surface level. It's fine.
Because the report provides a much, much greater depth of sort of how we see this going forward. But in essence, sort of the idea is that you need a cascading policy approach.
Okay.
Because what you do first affects what you do next.
And the arm bone's connected to the shoulder bone.
And you can't always get to where next is unless you do the first thing. And
are you the Sphinx from Mystery Men? Seriously. Good gravy, man.
For us, in our opinion, and I've seen this time and again with students and folks going into the IC, where you require a security clearance, you need a realistic timeline for 2022 and beyond.
What is that? What? Okay, realistic security clearance time. Okay, why? Explain that, please.
I've heard horror stories of taking 2 years.
Is 2 years necessary? Or what goes into a I assume background checks and things like that. Is that what we're talking about?
I think that's very unrealistic.
Well, okay. How? I don't know what goes on in acquiring security clearance. I don't know the procedures, the policies, the practices thereof. How would you recommend that process be streamlined down from 2 years to what would you say is a reasonable timeline? And I'm not being facetious here. I have no idea. Maybe he's got a point. What does that have to do with DEI?
I understand there's been some progress in certain areas to lessen that time. I know Director Burns has prioritized it, getting it to as low as 6 months.
Okay. Well, if I was going to go through a comprehensive security clearance policy with someone that's going to be trusted with the secrets of this nation, 6 months sounds great if that's what's needed. As far as I'm concerned, you do whatever you have to do to make sure the person coming on board is a viable individual. It's 6 months, 2 years, but okay, that has what to do with DEI?
But I don't see how you can recruit a workforce for the future when you're asking them to put their life on hold for as much as 2 years.
You set the expectation ahead of time. And then the people who are dedicated to it will go, and the people who aren't interested will go otherwise. That is what you do. Okay. My only concern is reducing the time necessary to create a security clearance. Is that creating in and of itself a national security issue? If it's not, then fine. If it is, then take whatever time you need. What does this have to do with DEI?
It's simply unsustainable. So you have to at least start with security clearance reform, and you have to prioritize this in a significant way.
How?
After that, I think there's lots of ways where you can build a workforce culture for today and tomorrow. Educational opportunity and outreach that has long been a mainstay of the IC.
How? What? What are you talking about?
Perhaps it should be prioritized, and you should send folks and recruiters to institutions made up of teams that aren't just necessarily graduates of that institution, but a diverse team of folks that look and sound like what the actual goals are for the IC.
I don't know if you were listening. I mean, I was, and I know you're in the intelligence community, so maybe it's difficult to decipher such complicated language as Director Clapper was giving you, but he tried that, and he said it didn't work. But okay, so you're recommending discriminatory practices in recruiting to make sure people look, etc. Okay, all right, that's your recommendation. Your very couched language, milquetoast, mealy-mouthed recommendation. Okay.
Flexible work models. I think we've all learned a lot in the past couple of years about different ways you can work from home. Can you build regional gift facilities or places across the country to sort of provide a greater,
I don't know,
some would say, quality of life and opportunity for living costs in schools and family? And are there ways you can do that? We think there are.
Would you like to list any of those ways?
Leadership, mentorship, and teamwork, absolutely essential.
You don't say. Leadership, mentorship, and teamwork in an organization? You know what? That's absolutely essential. At the post office, what, were you paid to do this?
Again, at every level. Reverse mentoring is critical. So
reverse mentoring. Okay, what's reverse mentoring? I can imagine, but
having someone of the next generation coming up through the ranks, they might have a different perspective than someone who has been in the organization for 30 years.
You don't say. Really? You mean I occasionally have to help my boss with computer stuff because he hasn't used this, that, or the other? Wow. God, what a revelation. That's amazing. Are you paid for this? Wow.
So it's important to listen and take in those perspectives as part of the day-to-day.
Yeah. Did you listen and take in the perspective of Director Clapper when he said he did the very thing you say you were recommending be done and it didn't fix the problem?
And then, of course, enduring mission narrative.
Yeah.
I think reinforcing that at every moment that you can is pretty important. So,
pretty important.
People don't sign up for this type of work for the same reasons they might sign up for Apple or Google or Fortune 500 companies.
Why do you bring up tech companies? Fortune 500 companies? Yeah, you're right. Becoming a public servant is a little bit different than going into the tech industry. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, being an intelligence officer requires something of someone more than personal enrichment. Yeah, you're absolutely correct.
Financial firms on Wall Street.
Yeah,
typically.
Yeah, you're right.
They sign up because they believe in the mission, and you have to continue that throughout careers.
Yeah.
You can't just be, again, sign up on day one and that's it. You have to believe in it over the course of career. So
yeah, and isn't that at least in large part up to the individual dedicating their lives to this work? Yeah. I mean cheerleading and keeping people on task. Yeah, no, I get it. They
have to understand and they have to see that from the start, but also over the course of their career. So you have to reinforce the enduring mission narrative, I think is the big point.
Dare I hope you detail how you recommend that be done?
And finally, implementation.
Implementation? Okay, great. Give me the implementation.
The way we look at this is about constructive oversight, not destructive.
Okay.
Sometimes you hear on Congress or in reports in the news on these issues that oversight sort of offers this view that indeed it's confrontational. It's not constructive.
How else do you maintain accountability? Of course, it's confrontational. It's oversight. It's making sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. What?
I think in fact, most cases of intelligence reform throughout history, there were constructive elements at work that were able to get things done.
And oversight has absolutely no ability to offer constructive review? What?
So it has to be a consistent priority across both Congress and the executive branch.
You want to get Congress and the executive branch to have a shared priority? Good luck.
Retired intelligence professionals like folks on our panel today and academics can also amplify this through their engagement with the community and classes and coursework and teaching students. But synergy across the board, I think, can ultimately get us to where we need to be.
And how, dare I ask, would you recommend instituting synergies? Gonna tell us?
So I'm gonna just...
Whoa, wait a second. Okay, I'm sorry. He puts this card up. He doesn't... Implementation, consistent policymaker direction, and a word that's covered up by his own photo, constructive oversight. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, must remain a consistent priority with regular direction from senior community leadership, organizational leaders, along with the oversight from intelligence committees and the President's Intelligence Advisory Board. Okay. Retired intelligence professionals and academics can serve to amplify this effort through their engagement with the community and educational institutions. Okay. Are you recommending a jobs program for retired intelligence professionals? Or are you just saying it'd be nice? Lastly, this is fundamentally constructive endeavor versus one perceived as destructive. Perceived. Okay. I hate to tell you this, but do you understand what a microaggression is? You understand how that works? You want to talk about perception? You can come in and be as constructive as you want. If somebody decides that they're offended by what you've done, you're suddenly destructive. So how do you control for that? How do you control perception of constructive versus destructive in a DEI environment? Of course, you're not going to tell us. You probably have no idea.
Get us to where we need to be. So I'm going to just quickly with Lindsay talk about some of our key takeaways and key recommendations, and then we'll turn to our panel.
I thought those were the recommendations. Those weren't the key recommendations? Okay, so now are we going to get the hows and the whys?
Of their concluding thoughts on the way ahead.
Oh, great.
So Lindsay, key takeaways.
Thank you, Michael.
What's that first word? Irate bear.
So throughout the report, we identified several things, several different aspects for insufficient progress over the years. That included, frequent leadership changes, which is normal in this space, but was definitely a contributing factor. Lack of middle management buy-in, poor metrics and absence of accountability, and a general cultural failure to embrace diversity is integral to IC mission success.
And how do you suggest that be fixed?
They rather saw it as a political correctness.
It is political. Did you not listen to Director Clapper? He said it about as bluntly and as simply as you could. I'm going to say something that's not very politically correct, because it was literally not politically correct.
The second aspect was the fact that personnel numbers are classified still, and most, if not all, historical reports, not the most recent ones, as Lori mentioned, are still classified. This really makes it difficult for us to really assess what happened in the past to where we are today. Well, we know there's been significant progress, it's really hard for us to assess this from an open source perspective.
Yeah, especially when you decide to implement discriminatory hiring practices under the radar. Yeah.
And when we have a lack of transparency, it really fosters poor accountability.
Okay, well, here's the thing. Here's the question I guess I have then. If a lack of transparency is both inherent and, in some cases, most cases, necessary for the security of our intelligence assets, intelligence community, and so on, how can you ever know what the heck is going on as a reporting mechanism? Or is it an analysis mechanism on the outside about who is or is not doing what? Is this entire process just one big exercise of doggy paddling? I guess is my question.
But we do see significant progress in that space, specifically over the last 5 to 10 years.
I guess you would just have to see it since you're not allowed to measure it, right?
And lastly, as we've mentioned several times, is that we believe that diversity statistics are actually far worse than they appear because of the lack of inclusion of contractors in the IC workforce.
Okay, how would you solve for that problem? I'll ask again. How would you recommend that problem be solved?
Because they're not included, even though they are definitely an integral part of the community.
Okay.
Back to you, Michael.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Lindsay. So
those are the recommendations. Oh wait, are we at the recommendations now?
So what are some of our key recommendations?
Okay.
Big picture is to think about this as an intelligence professional, is that we use the cycle as a framework to continuously monitor and assess and act upon the requirement of building a diverse workforce. We need to transparently facilitate a whole of IC accounting.
That's not going to happen. She just said it, and that's not going to change. There's going to be no full transparency in what the intelligence community is doing as far as its hiring or recruitment practices. You already know this. It's not going to happen. So that one's void from the get-go.
Including both our organizations and public servants, but also contractors to accurately measure and strengthen accountability.
Not going to happen. It is a moot point, and you know it.
Leading culture change, as we talked about, requires cascading sequential actions to build cohesive momentum. I've heard a number of our panelists reflect.
Oh, the corporate speak is so thick. Oh my God, dude. Man, I really hope you got a good payday out of this. I really hope you did, because this is quite the grift. Pumping a statement full of that kind of nonsense pablum as though it means anything. Boy, oh boy.
On that today is that, again, it's not one and done. You're making good progress, but you have to keep going. And to me, that's about momentum. And it includes steps like clearance reform, outreach, education, and especially retention.
Yeah, great. Just as a high-level, broad concepts that say nothing about actual actions to be taken. That's great. All right.
And finally, oversight.
Yeah.
With an engagement with Congress, perhaps the President's Intelligence Advisory Board, veterans, and scholars, in a constructive way that is not destructive.
And what does that look like? What is currently being done, and what would you suggest be implemented or changed to achieve the goals you're looking for? Can you compare and contrast current policy versus your recommended policy? Is that possible? Could you do that? Good God.
The intelligence community is the first line of defense of the American people. This is not a partisan issue. This is an American issue, and we need the best, most diverse, capable workforce we can build.
Are you sure it's not a partisan issue? Are you sure? Are you sure about that?
And in my mind, that's sort of part of the way forward. And that's what we're thinking about in our report. So I do want to take a couple minutes here, though, to turn back to our panel and give them an opportunity to share some thoughts on what they think of as in the way ahead. What are they thinking about? Did any of these resonate with them? We'll start with Natalie.
Okay, I've got 6 minutes to the bottom of the hour, and I really honestly can't go any further for the sake of time. I am going to call it here, both on this broadcast and in the series. I have heard more than enough. The first 10, 15 minutes or so were an amazing admission by a senior level government official of actions taken off the books that fly in the face of civil rights laws in an effort to solve for the problem of DEI, which if you needed any further proof that there is absolutely no logic to conflating the Civil Rights Act and equal employment laws under the rubric of DEI, I don't know what else you need. Okay? That makes the entire premise of the report as they framed it illegitimate. It's got nothing to do with nothing. DEI and equal opportunity are not conducive with one another. Is that the word I'm looking for? Might or might not be. My brain's a little fried right now. It's amazing. This has been amazing to watch. But more so, it's also been kind of disturbing to watch grown adults in the intelligence community seemingly unaware of what it is that they're asking for, what it is that they're implying, and my cousin Vinny as intelligence. God. Out of everything else, that example probably breaks my brain more. Here's an example of visibility. Had nothing to do with the looks of the guy. Anyway, I'll take a minute or two here to see if anybody else has anything they'd like to say. And then I'll wrap it up. Ziji Antewari. The IC is the first line of defense for the American people. That's a terrifying and depressing thought. Yeah. Insofar as these individuals are representative of the thinking and or logic behind that notion. Yeah. John Miller, sounds like they are sacrificing the best for diversity points, so I see our intelligence community is suffering. When you heard it in several instances now, both in the prior two parts and in this one, where someone says something about merit, right? But they have to pull it back and then sort of, but it's also about this and then. Yeah, they know inherently, instinctively, they know that what they're talking about is inherently contradictory and or inherently illegal or at least unethical. And they can't, again, all credit, such as it is, to Director Clapper for just coming out and saying it. Saying what all of the people on this panel would love to just be able to say and have done. But even in the face of one of their own senior legends coming out and saying it, saying that they actually implemented it, they don't have much to comment on. Even though he did what they all are effectively recommending and it didn't solve the problem, don't know what to tell you. Ryan R. DEI is destroying society quickly. I don't know if it's destroying society. I don't know what destroying society means. There will always be a society, some way, shape, or form. It is turning the clock backwards on how we assess one to another individuals in this country. What we value of a person's characteristics. It is a refutation of the I have a dream speech. To put it as simply as possible, a refutation of everything that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had to say on this subject in that speech. And since the sentiments and the values promoted in that speech, and consequently in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and at least as pertains to this presentation, Title VII of 1964, all of this is an absolute refutation of those values. That bothers me quite a bit. And it amazes me that thinking adult individuals don't see that that's what they are promoting. Time and time again. I suppose this one's more disturbing than anything else because the people involved in this discussion are or have been in positions of ridiculously widespread authority over people's lives and safety. But here we are. So anyway, everyone, thank you so much for joining me for this unexpected part 3, now a trilogy, looking at the past, present, and future of DEI in the intelligence community. If you'd like to hear more from me, you can find me here, well, Wednesday morning at some time. I don't have a set date for it, for my review of Moon Knight Episode 5, because that's coming up. And then, as usual, on Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, you can find me here for TED Excellence, where once again I'll take a look at an off-brand TED Talk for education and information. I call it Information. And then on Sunday, once more, at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, you can find me here for the Sunday stream, which I'll use to look at something new, something different, something having nothing to do with the intelligence community. But looking forward to that. Everybody, thank you again for joining me. Hope you all have a good rest of your Monday. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very little to do. Everybody who donated either to myself or, and I keep forgetting, please take a look at the top of the chat box if you have an opportunity. There are some GoFundMe's pinned there for our friends Shady Grin, Angry Illinoisian, and his kitten. They and their friends, loved ones, and families could certainly use your help if you have it to spare. And with that, everybody, I hope you are all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.